for these crimes is actually mandated by the Quran.
There was this notorious law under which if a woman was raped, she had to produce 4 male witnesses to the penetration. If she couldn't produce that, then she would go to jail for sex outside marriage, which was illegal.
Public hangings, public floggings.
Harsh though they may seem to us, all those punishments are perfectly acceptable under Islamic law.
People are not allowed to travel. People are not allowed to voice their own opinions.
I believe in freedom of thought, freedom of expression.
People are not allowed to voice their ideas. They're not allowed to do anything at all.
It is freedom with responsibility, not freedom for the sake of freedom or free for all.
What I am sitting and doing right now in this drawing room is a crime under martial law regulation.
Then he had this extraordinary break in his favor. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan.
Pakistan was important from the very beginning. For strategic reasons, you only have to look at a map.
I think the administration thought that the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was a major threat to the United States, that the Soviet Union would dominate the northern part of the Persian Gulf, it would threaten Western oil supplies, and the communists would have scored a major victory.
The main task became defeat the Russians, whatever the cost. And that made this squalid dictator into a plucky fighter for freedom. Brzezinski actually went to the Afghan border.
But that land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
A lot of these religious primers, which were teaching kids in the madrasas, you know, all the jihadi rhetoric, Kaf, the letter K, Kaf is for Kalashnikov. All these textbooks were specially printed by the University of Nebraska. Reagan introduced these guys to the press corps once and said, these are the equivalents of our founding fathers. And some of us watching at the time was sort of joking, which one is Washington? Which one is Jefferson? You know, where's Benjamin Franklin among them?
The two boys, Murtaza and Shanawaz, were very disillusioned and they went to Afghanistan.
Shanawaz was the youngest of the 4 kids. They all adored him so much, such a nice, kind kid.
He was always smiling. Benazir always talked about him being incredibly handsome and a great charmer. He wasn't as intense and serious as Murtaza was.
Mir had the arrogance of the man of the family. He needed to feel he was doing something, so there was a lot of sort of talk.
The underground resistance, if you're shot off the street, then you're going to go underneath and blow the hell out of the place. So there's going to be a lot of trouble.
They were trying to build a group from outside the country to overthrow the government of Zia.
Their politics were a bit more radical than hers.
There's been a dramatic development in the Damascus hijack today.
The Pakistan government has been claiming that the man behind the hijacking is the eldest son of Pakistan's former president, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Murtaza vowed to avenge their father's death.
The hijacking of the PIA airliner took place, then it had become very, very difficult.
Has Murtaza crossed the line between political activity in exile and terrorism? The Pakistan government says he has.
Benazir's brothers were branded as terrorists.
In the end, the Pakistan government capitulated to the hijackers, agreeing to swap the political prisoners for the hostages aboard the PIA plane.
Benazir was charged with connection to those terrorist brothers. Zia threw her into a Class C cell in the desert of sin. Class C are the lowest quality cells that there are.
I walked up and down and up and down and up and down. What the hell is there to do when you're locked up in solitary confinement?
She had not talked to anyone for several years. When I went to visit her, she could not talk. She would write on a piece of paper whatever she wanted to tell me because her jaws had locked.
It would be so harsh, I can't tell you. And my ear is hurting me.
She had some ear complaint and they called a doctor. They said, you're not well and we're going to give you medicine. But the medicine they were giving her, I think, were tranquilizers because my mother noticed she was becoming like a zombie.
I think his basic thought was that he could kill her.
By the time the Afghan war was in full swing, Zia knew that the US couldn't do without him.
The Reagan administration simply let the Pakistani dictator decide how billions of US dollars would be used to fight the Soviets. And Zia gave them to the most extreme Islamic groups.
That is the period when Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence, ISI, became a powerful octopus-like agency with a finger in every sphere of public life in the country. Massive spying apparatus, massive budget.
The ISI is the NSA, the CIA, and the Pentagon all rolled into a single body. It is, in some sense, a shadow military force.
The ISI would use enormous funds to actually create organizations which they armed and then used in Afghanistan.
The Mujahideen is the term that we use to describe the diverse groups of militants and fighters, some Afghan, but many from outside of Afghanistan, fighters all over the world who gathered to repel the Soviet invasion.
Osama bin Laden was a part of that movement. He was a particularly well-resourced and effective militia leader.
We thought that defeating the Soviet Union was so important that we didn't care that we were actually supporting Osama bin Laden and people who were his allies.
As far as Pakistan was concerned, it destroyed the social fabric of that country because you had armed groups backed by the military regime running wild in the country. Another of the sort of numerous ironies, the Americans got rid of Bhutto because of the nuclear bomb. Then General Zia, their man, is in power and uses the fact that he's become absolutely necessary for the United States to fight the war in Afghanistan to basically build the bomb. And that is what he did.
I say that it is the right of any developing country to acquire the modern technology. And amongst the modern technology is the nuclear technology. Nuclear technology for peaceful purposes.
The notion that American military intelligence didn't know about it is just nonsense. They knew what was going on very well. It was a price they were prepared to pay.
In December of 1982, General Zia came to Washington. And as part of his visit, he had a lunch with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The only senator who was on time was Pell, his biggest critic. In the very first question, Pell handed him a letter about political prisoners. Benazir was the first name on the list, and he raised Benazir's case, described her conditions of imprisonment. Zia responded by saying, "Oh no, that's not right, Senator. She's now under house arrest, and she lives in a more comfortable house than any of your senators, and her friends can visit." So I decided I'd go there.
You know, our family home in Larkana, they declared it's a sub-jail, so it wasn't like you could come and go as you wished. So I was always going to Home Secretary's office and this one's office and that one's office, begging, can I go and see them? And then they would let you see them for 1 hour.
I arrived in Karachi, still not knowing if I was going to be able to see Benazir. And on the last day, I came into the consulate, and it turned out that at 2:30 that morning, Benazir had been taken out of house arrest.
She was released from prison only because she was in terrible physical shape. She was in danger of dying, and that's why Zia al-Haq let her out. I take it he didn't want to be held accountable for more Bhutto blood, and she went to London.
I went to the airport, and there was a sea of people. We kind of like a whole herd. We went into this room which had been designated for her to give a press conference, As she began to talk, it was almost the words came out really very slowly to start with, and then suddenly it was kind of a surge of energy.
I asked her this afternoon if in the eyes of President Zia, she was now conveniently out of the way.
What do you mean having me out of the way? How am I out of the way?
Out of Pakistan.
Out of Pakistan, but surely when I was in Pakistan, I was under detention, and I remained acting chairman of the party. Of course, it was very difficult for me to have any communication with anybody, but I tried and I made an effort. I should think that being in a free country, or being abroad and not under imprisonment, there is surely a greater degree of flexibility in contacting our party people. Our party, I don't understand what you mean that after my mother